Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ayotunde Koka, and I'll be moderating the panel that follows the presentations. So, without much further ado, I'll introduce the panelists, and if you come onto the stage, please, as I introduce you, and then we'll start with brief introductions of what you do, and then we'll go into the questions and answers. I'll ask Uzoma Dozie to join us on the stage. Great to see you, Uzoma. It's Yetunde Faulkner, Daniel Watts, Kelechi Oti. Please join the panel. You've been introduced, and yes. Pardon me for that. So let's go into the rapid fire. Let's start with Uzoma. It's great to see you again. So I'll go round back the other way now and start with Kelechi.
Okay. Hi everyone. All right, I like a cheerful audience. I see a familiar face. That's good. Okay, so I'm Kelechi Oti, CTO, co-founder of the MOR Start Button. Yeah, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Dan Watts. I'm the Chief Risk Officer at Oxygen X. Good evening.
Thank you. I'm Yetunde Faulkner. I'm the Executive Director and Chief Operating Officer of Fast Credit Financial Services Company.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Uzoma Dozie. I'm the founder of Sparkle MFB, a digital bank for individuals and small businesses.
No, you introduced yourself, yes. No, you've done it already. Yes, excellent. So let's go into the rapid fire. Let's start with Uzoma. It's great to see you again. You've traveled the journey of building the large bank, innovating within that. Now also with what you've been doing with Sparkle. How do you see digital channels now being the biggest target for sort of fraud, illicit flows? What's changed? There's one thing, in as much as so much has changed, so much has remained the same with all this AI stuff. So what perspective do you bring that in with what the CBN is now doing with the anti-money laundering guidelines in the context you operate in now?
Thanks for that question. But I think when you talk about fraud happens on Instagram, for example, because that's an e-commerce platform. So any platform that has an exchange of value is going to be susceptible to that. Now, I think, this is a great initiative by the central bank because it's about not just knowing your customer, because you can do your know your customer, which is as far as I'm concerned static. This is the person. But what he does once he enters your system is a different thing. That's where the challenge is. So like understanding the transaction, what type of transactions he's doing, understanding the customer's journey, because the customer journey of a criminal is different from the customer journey of a pious person, right? And the pious person can become a criminal too. So when that changes, how do you know? And so that's where, and then, fraud is under money laundering. So anti-money laundering, how do you keep good people good? So I think the rules are not there to keep bad people away, but to help the good people in their moments of weakness. But I think the biggest, this is all great, but I think the biggest problem is transparency and data sharing. Regardless of whatever happens, if there is no incentive to share information, we're just going to be living in silos, and silos introduces darkness. And that is where, no matter how good your technology is, the criminal's technology is the same, but it works in the shadows. So you must shed light in the whole ecosystem.
So it's a bit more like, it now becomes not just KYC, KYT, know your transactions.
Know your transactions, yeah, and know your people.
Yeah. And something that always works exactly in financial services, always know how to get into the rhythm of your customer's life. And that's
so it's like what you see in the UK. So policing is like when the policeman walks the beat, he's not looking for the bad people. He's actually understanding his ecosystem. So when something goes wrong, he knows exactly who to eliminate and actually who to focus on, who the possible suspects are. And that's really what this is about.
In this collaboration, do you think it's the industry could sort of self make it happen, or do you think it's going to be subject to regulation?
I think regulation can only go so far. And I go back to that first of all, I believe, and I do know that there's actually more fraud that is reported, that happens than is reported. Because unfortunately, if you keep hearing that Sparkle was defrauded, and that Sparkle is a place where is an ecosystem of trust where you're supposed to keep your money. You're not going to put your money there. So people understate the amount of fraud that happens. And so how does the regulator and the industry work together to incentivize the ecosystem to share information without without that stigma of, you've been defrauded, we can't trust you, we're not keeping our money with you. That's the challenge, one of the challenges that we have.
Going on to Yetunde, this can sort of segue into the governance aspect of this. We talked about, okay, yes, would it be due to regulation or market collaboration, and aspects of governance as well. Governance, risk management, authentic risk management, right? So how do you see this changing with what's coming on now with the AML regulation, and how companies, fintechs, agile environments, put in the right governance, and what kind of challenges do
I would say a bit of regulation will be required. Today, we informally share. I was smiling as I was talking. We informally share today. You find that the risk managers have WhatsApp platform where when someone comes on and you just think this person is too clean, they drop a name, and people who know that name say, oh, he applied 2 days ago. And sometimes in about 1 hour, 4 or 5 organizations will say, I'm processing his application. Yet it's not recorded on the platform, on the credit bureau, anywhere. But 5 different organizations say, I'm processing. And all 5 would agree to knock off and not give application and evaluate that individual or even that business. So I believe that for that data share to be available to all, the open banking, the regulation has to come in, and we must all commit to sharing.
Actually, you made a subtle point there about credit bureaus, okay? And they actually are information sharing points around individual activity.
Yeah, but
right?
it happens 30 days later. That person's
Yes.
already taken a loan. But this one, we're all processing in a period of 48 hours, and we already know that this person is there, is here.
So maybe those credit bureaus have to be in real time, in the line of the transactions.
And all needs to be on, whether regulated by CBN, whether regulated by CBN, whether the license is by the state. Everybody needs to report.
Yes.
That's when it will work.
Yes. Just maybe you mentioned around the template you have, and considering actually, I've been a sort of technologyist historically. If you get a good template, use it, pick it up, plagiarize it, populate it, move quickly, get your enterprise architecture in place, and get going, right? So do you see, does that give you that framework, see some external touch points as well? We talked about, credit bureaus, real time, inline of the process, transaction monitoring. What are the key strengths of that template that can enable the kind of agility that organizations need to put in place right now?
Very good. So it covers all of the key chapters that the bank has to address to demonstrate to CBN that they have thought about all of the key elements of the new regulation. And it then allows you, so that the template is incomplete. The 2 areas that it needs to be strongest is for you to demonstrate to CBN that you know where your bank is today, the as is. We have this core banking, we have this provisions for AML, we have that. And then to show them that you know where you need to go to cover the regulation. So that's the gap analysis. In my mind, given this template, although it fulfills all of the main chapters, these are the two main areas the banks need to focus their energy on, because the gap analysis also shows the CBN that you know what's missing and you know how to complete what's missing. So those are the areas that when you take this template, when you look at it, of course, look at all of the fillers, and you find that you may not change any of those areas because it just shows basic understanding of what the regulation requires. But where you spend most of your time is demonstrating you know where your business is and demonstrating where your business needs to go to be ready for that regulation.
Yeah, from those perspectives, because you just hinted on a couple of things subtly while we were having a chat before the panel session. How do you see the role sort of getting the right data insights, the kind of challenges you see in putting the sort of technology platforms in place, the kind of exposures you might get? How do you deal with that, and what is the opportunities you see in addressing AML issues?
All right, so I would talk from our perspective. So we have a cross-border payment infrastructure, so we can be seen like we're doing payments. But I think the first thing you need to do is to have all of the fragmented data in one place. When you have all of this data just separated on the partners end, you have your refunds data separate, you not being able to clearly see what a transaction life cycle is, and also understanding what your merchants, I hope I'm not speaking gibberish. Understanding so in our case, we have multiple merchants, right? So you have merchant A, merchant B, merchant C. Each of them have very different transaction patterns. Now, understanding what those transaction patterns is gives you a very clear insight to at least an indication of some fraud happening on your system, and then you can action it. Just like one of the panelists said here, one of the key things missing today is speed. When someone uses your system to clean money or to launder money, they're not waiting for your 24 hours monitoring or something for that you bust them. They're moving the money out almost immediately. So how do you find that out, immediately? So you have to, build those systems. Okay.
Okay, great. Yeah, going on to Dan, with the innovations you're putting in place so in country and unique service offers that you have, how does this play into the fraud and AML space, and what actions you take that you be able to meet the CBN requirements, but also be ahead of the game in making sure that you can track the kind of transactions?
Thank you. So I think it's to what Kelechi said to some extent. It's about leveraging the data, unifying your data sources. As Uzoma said, you have a customer that onboards, you collect information about them, you do some checks, then you have that customer journey. They're making transactions. You're gathering more data. So it's really how do you unify that data to then identify the patterns for the suspicious actors, the bad actors. And also I think where some of these systems have not been as good in the past is thinking about how you identify networks of individuals and networks of transactions. So people are often connected, and if you can identify these connections using a broader data set, then you can actually help to weed out more of the bad actors in the first place, and also reduce false positives. I think it's because it's about part of this isn't about putting regulation in for the sake of regulation. But it's ultimately about protecting customers as well. So, there needs to be strong customer outcomes.
We have the people in the audience here who might be thinking, okay, what's my key takeaway here? What next?
So I think everyone has to, first of all, regardless of what is coming, has to put their house in order. And the first thing is your data. Now, so even from your own personal self. So like one of the things that personally, so before I put your name in my phone book, right, I must know your first name and your surname. If I look at many people's phone, it's like Uzoma the carpenter, Uzoma the painter, Uzoma this. That's dirty data as far as I'm concerned, because you might not need it. And like it's a great example is my name is Uzoma Chukuma Eze Dozie. My son's name is Uzoma Chidiebere Dozie, UCD Uzoma Dozie. So if you don't clearly put that data in, every time we travel together or separately, there's always a problem because of that. So like we have to spell your name out clearly. Now, so you find that because without that, you can't even leverage AI or the tools that are there, right, to either prevent fraud, create better customer experience, efficiencies in the business. That just is not going to happen. Now, I think one of my biggest problems with also the regulator is that sometimes we're trying to eat our cake and have it, because more technology, so like leveraging on the new technologies mean getting rid of people. Now, the regulator will tell you because it means we're going to have to find new jobs for people, because the fact about it is that and a simple example, if you look at, for anybody who has gone to Singapore, if you're flying into Singapore and you look at the port, you can't see a single human being there. So you have efficiencies, but you go to the Apapa port, you see a bit of people and all kinds of things happen there. And so it's like banking. If I go to a bank and I see, okay, you have all these digital channels and then you have all these human beings around it, right? There's something completely wrong. So we have to strike a balance of, okay, first of all, clean the data. But once you've cleaned the data, and once we're all moving into an era where we're leveraging AI, once we're using systems to actually not only know your customer's transaction, know when your customer has changed, know millions of transactions, and also anticipate even artificial intelligence related fraud, then people have to do something else. So whilst you're coming up with these things, you have to also come up with ways for other people to do other things. But I think my own message here, first of all, is get your data clean, right? And capture all kinds of data that is related to your business and also unrelated to your business, because that will also help you determine the context in which your data is playing.
Thanks, Dan. What do you see as what's next in innovation to address this issue, or an opportunity, actually?
I mean, it's difficult to say, to add more to what Uzoma just said around, the data. I mean, yeah, that's really the starting point, because if you're not collecting the right data in the right places, then you're on a hiding to nothing. But I think one of the innovations, one of the things that we started looking at particularly is around graph databases. So understanding those connections between individuals and how they might have shared information, or maybe how they transact amongst themselves. I think that helps you build a richer picture of what's going on.
Great, and it's sort of coming in a way to that sort of shared environment, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Hold that thought. Kelechi, you talked about the international ecosystem you have with your platform. We've talked about shared environment here and so on. Do you really see something like international collaboration here for effective cross-country operations? We have AFCFTA now driving more cross-border transactions and so on. So AML now starts to be a broader opportunity in tracking. Do you see any of those patterns, on what next opportunities in your platforms?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. With the way growth is happening now. It has to happen, right? I think somebody mentioned, data being interconnected. And that would only happen at that point. Sadly, I don't think we have anything close to that today. A lot of institutions have to do that from scratch, and that data resides within them. So that's the place that innovation can start. But I would just piggyback on what Mr. Dozier said. You first need to get your data right, then get it unified. And what I mean by unification, merchant unification, customer unification, because the customer might be paying across merchant A, merchant B. Your system should be able to know that it's the same customer doing that. So once you have that unified, you get your system to learn from the data and then reinforce that learning. So all of these data points would help internally while we're striving for the international world to get done.
It's almost like no panel is complete if you don't say AI. And everyone's been kind of talking to that kind of AI intelligence of being able to give the insights indirectly. And some of that might actually also come into governance, talk about the governance community here today and how things might happen in real time. How do you see these kind of things coming together now as a next step for what we need to do?
This myriad of data then needs to become integrated. Then we need to also begin to report and automate reporting. Today, I don't know any organization here that will know within 1 hour that a fraud has happened. Most will find out in maybe within 48 to 72 hours. So, but if we then begin to automate, we then will have templates that is similar across, which will make automation possible. Templates are available. We've spoken to templates today. Templates are available. We automate, and then we integrate the sources. Then it's easier. In terms of governance, in fact, reporting your machine learning will be easier, which is where AI comes in. And the minute that happens, when data sources have been integrated, the templates are defined, data sources are integrated, AI is machine learning is easier to be done, which is what AI speaks to. Have I answered your question?
Machine learning in banking. Yeah, exactly. And that's where you start to get agentic AI, because it's at that point that really starts to come together. And in terms of real-time stuff, I mean, I'm going back quite a while ago now, being in the bank, and we, text alerts and so on. And I recall, it's many years ago now, so I recall an alert came in. Someone thought, oh dear, what's going on? Account manager, I just had this debit on my account. That triggered something onto another call desk, and the security systems right down to very detailed database view were able to trace it. Actually, this was really about 10 or 15 minutes to identify what was going on, to then trace it to local network monitoring for an inside job that took it to exactly where that desk is, and security went to pick up the guy. So this is not like last week. This is going back over 10 years now. So it's important to put those security architectures in place that allow you to respond to certain. Some of them is coming, but some of them is by accident. That just showed the importance of text messaging real time and how it could identify something. Another personal thing, I always have myself as Ayotunde Koka. Because if you just say Tunde Koka, you might be linked to somebody somewhere else. Yeah. I intentionally left maybe to the last question, in that to round up, how do you see things now playing out? The kind of role Izifin can play in a summary of these next steps we've just discussed in the last 10 minutes.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Every single panelist spoke about data. I mean, data is so impossibly important. you cannot do any of this without data. It's already been mentioned as well. So for data to be fully leveraged, a lot of these banks need to do their housekeeping on their data infrastructure. Sometimes it's not just about not having the data, it's being able to access that data quick enough for real-time implementation. That came up. So to Zoma's point, I believe he made that point, housekeeping, important, very beginning. And in fact, with those of you that are looking at your roadmaps, that is the first conversation you need to have internally. Where are we now infrastructure-wise, and where do we need to go? What's somewhat overlooked as well is training and change management. What this might do to some banks is put them in shock. You know, you have sales teams out there with pen and paper to acquire customers. KYC is a photocopy of the documents that could be forged, no originals. And then someone goes into the core banking manually, enters information. I mean, there's so many traps there. And now you're going to step back. This has to be done digitally. So there is going to be a culture shock for many businesses, making sure that that's managed well. And I think a point made earlier that you don't have these systems in place and bodies all around them to get them working, because that won't survive. So it's the training as well. From an Izifin standpoint, it's the implementation. From what we've done with the AML AML regulation is that we've split up into two main systems: the AI part of the regulation and then the operational side of the regulation. The AI side looks more at KYC, KYB, looks at anomaly detection. So from now on, with the new regulation, you have to look at anomalies. Anomaly detection is not easy. It's about trying to identify when something unusual happens and flagging it. But of course, as mentioned earlier, if there are too many false positives, it breaks. So a lot of work has to be done there. Aside from that, there's risk scoring. So something that came up in regulation is that every customer transaction needs to have a risk score. This customer just put in money into the account, large sums, never seen before, took it out immediately. That has a risk score. And what you need to do is trigger that risk score sufficient enough time to prevent that money from going out. So you need to have systems to identify these risks and stop them before they happen. The other aspects are, and what's always overlooked, is adverse media. And I think this came up earlier as well, where it's not good enough to know this customer who he is. What's important is who he is in your business over time. Have they now appeared in international watch lists? Have they now become PEP? Have they now become sanctioned? So you're not just looking at new customers, you're looking at existing customers. So I can speak about it all day and all night, trust me, if you let me. But there's an AI aspect to this that needs to be looked at thoroughly. Do not underestimate the efforts in that. And the operational aspect, now this is the case management. Now, getting the alerts, knowing that there's fraud or an AML attempt, a money laundering attempt, is not enough. You need to be able to see it. You need to be able to see all the historical transactions that customers have done that led to that alert. And you need to be able to then show that to an auditor if they come to see what you've been doing and be able to explain, this person did this, then did that. We looked at it. It was okay. Moved on. This person did this and did that. It was suspicious. We stopped the transaction. We closed the account. That is the level of detail an auditor needs to come in and see and say, you're doing a good job. Aside from that is reporting. To Mrs. Faulkner's point, this now has to be done literally in real time and literally automated. The good old days where you have a guy who writes your reports and sends it to a platform is gone. You have to build those reports automatically, capture the data automatically, and push it automatically. So these are the two main systems that there are. We have, as you can see from the background, a lot of these systems already in place. Some of them may need to be customized. Some of them can be used out of the box. It depends on your business. As I said earlier, when I spoke in the beginning, it doesn't matter how big or small your business are. There are a lot of elements to this regulation. So I encourage you to look at partnering, not necessarily with just us, but obviously I prefer if it was us or other people. You don't have to do this on your own.
Okay, thanks very much to the panelists. Great discussion. I think we can take a couple of questions from the audience. We've got about 10 minutes to do that.
Okay, my name is Eche from Coronation Merchant Bank. The discussions around automating the anti-money laundering guidelines can be a bit conflicting because when we talk about fraud, right, in the traditional banking sense, we are talking about unauthorized transactions. But when we talk about anti-money laundering, it's not necessarily unauthorized, right? So how do you balance between this guideline and customer convenience or instruction? That's one. Two, I like the thought around partnerships, which is very critical because, like they say, the chain is only as strong as the weakest link, right? And we are aware that the different players in the industry have different levels of maturity, technology-wise or compliance-wise, right? So it's also important that the regulatory bodies, CBN and the likes, would come up with frameworks or structures that will put the industry at an acceptable level, first of all. I know there were conversations around centralized KYC at some point by CBN, but that project has sort of not seen the daylight. But it was a very good one by them because I believe the fintechs and some banks, would be able to leverage on that. And someone also mentioned centralized data, which is very important. Data sharing, right? Because a customer today might not be flagged by a bank, but might be flagged by another bank in real time. And like you said, transactions are real time. So it would be good to be able to pass this through a centralized system that has the trust of both the banks and the customers. All right. So, but back to my first question, how do you balance between unauthorized and authorized?
I think the whole idea of anti-money laundering is to stop fraudulent monies from moving. And so I think there's that connection. Fraud happens, and then how do you discourage that money from moving out? And that's the anti-money laundering. How did you get? I think in Nigeria we've lost our moral compass because you see somebody with 10 billion naira and nobody asks that KYC, know your customer. How did you get 10 billion? Right? That money was laundered from bad to good. Now, so fraud happens, and then whether it's permitted or not permitted, that's a different question. But is there a fraud? Was it got legally? If it was not got legally, then how do you stop them from actually using that money? And that's actually what this is about, and that's what it's about. So I can tell my mother that, just sign here and I'll move this money to bank X, but I move it to bank B. She's giving me permission. Now, the anti-money laundering is the next bit, and that is where banks are the ecosystem is responsible from stopping them. Because if you can get away with it, then there'll be much more fraud. But if you can't, because you have this anti-money laundering mechanism and framework, it's difficult. So a simple example today, 10 years ago, people would commit fraud and move money to the UK and buy houses and everything. But today, before you buy a house in the UK, you must, even from not just the bank, from your lawyer, from the real estate, you have to prove your source of funds. And so that is the part of that whole anti-money laundering framework that says, committing this fraud is very, very expensive. So fraud will happen, but it's now expensive to launder that money. And that's the whole idea.
Okay, so if I can chip in on the technology end, so if you have a customer that maybe normally would transact below 1,000 naira daily or monthly, and all of a sudden 100 million is coming to the account, like I said, the first thing is to understand the customer's pattern, right? If my usual transaction volume is 100 million and you block me, you're looking for trouble, right? But when there's that sort of anomaly, it doesn't need to be, yes, so when the person is onboarding, yes, you took KYC documents, you know the business the person is doing, but you do not know when the growth is happening. But the data can tell you that. But if the data is not saying that, and you see that sort of anomaly, it's the system's responsibility to flag it. So, and especially when the money comes, and almost immediately the money wants to leave, there's something, fishy there. So we can do a lot once we look at the data better. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions? There's one. Okay.
Yes, thank you so much, our panelists. It was really insightful. But my question is this. Now, obviously, technology is the new thing for everyone. And my question is, first and foremost, how would you say any organization that is looking forward should prioritize artificial intelligence or technology? How high a priority should it be for them when it comes to helping with all of these processes that we mentioned? Risk scoring, automations, reporting, etc., like that. How important or how high priority should every organization make it? And also, secondly, is what do you think organizations need to do or put in place to make sure that their AI readiness is top notch and ready for them to receive the integration of artificial intelligence into their systems?
I will speak from from user's perspective, and user here being maybe the bank or an institution like you. Like for us, we want to make it easier for people to get paid and pay across Africa. Our core is not AI, right? But it's essential because whether you like it or not, it's the new norm. It's come to stay. And that's where partnership comes in. Right. So like for me, it's always a discussion of should we build this in-house or should we take it outside? If it's not core to what we are meant to be giving our customer, we need to find the right partner to leverage to get us that service. Right. So that's my point. So now I'll pass the mic to the guru to.
Thank you. So the first question on how important it is, for me, when I'm asked that question, I think about a clogged pipe, for instance. Yeah, the pipe still works, and you can still get water through, but it's very slow, and it continues to clog. It gets slower and slower. Focusing on technology is like putting in the time to clean out that pipe. Yeah, it takes time. You have to stop operations for a while, but then the productivity grows significantly. The challenge is you sometimes have businesses that think a bit too short term. I don't want to stop operations. We have priorities now. Let's delay it for later. But when they delay it for later and they have competitors that don't, perhaps they get ahead a couple of weeks, couple of months. But when the competitors turn on those full pipes, they do much better. So I personally think there is no disadvantage of prioritizing AI and machine learning and technology first, because the benefits are felt substantially over the medium to long term. Yeah, so that's my answer to that. And then for the AI readiness, it's not easy. I think the first thing is to make it clear that it's not easy. For you, a business to leverage AI, they need to first understand that it's not something that you get and it works immediately. There is a relationship between AI and the business. They have to coexist. You put in an AI system, it will fail. It's not perfect. That's the thing. There's always misunderstanding that AI is perfect. It's not. It will fail. Then you have to realize, is it because of the data? Is it because how it was used? And you figure out why, then you try again. It improves, but it's not perfect. You try again, it improves, and it gets better. And again. Now, there will be a point where it matures so profoundly that you're getting the true value for money, but there is a patience that needs to be applied. Kind of like you're nurturing a child. AI is sometimes like a baby in your business. It has to learn about your business, and it needs time. So I think suffice management and staff understand that life cycle, then you're there. So to get that understanding, as I always encourage businesses to do, partner with experts. Partner with a business that can provide that initial learning, and then hire your own team in-house. And then you have the benefit of the vendor to accelerate you. Then you have the benefit of the vendor helping you prepare an in-house resource, and then you start to grow. And before you know it, you're running your own AI team. Before you know it, you even pull out the vendor entirely. By the time you get to that level of maturity. But I always recommend starting with an expert.
I think first of all, you talk about technology, and I think first of all, you have to understand the psychology before you apply the right technology. There's some technologies that might work in the city, but it won't work in the village. So you have to understand the context. And for AI readiness, this is my own simple view, you have to be paperless. Forget all the complication. You have to move all your data from paper to digital, because you cannot use AI on paper, right? So like everything, pictures, there's nothing that, in fact, I don't even use paper. And if you give me a piece of paper, I actually scan it onto my phone. And so like even the technology is actually your phone and your iPad. You can do a lot of AI just using those tools. Just wake up and just say, I'm not going to use cash and I'm not going to use technology. I'm not going to use paper. And then you are as AI ready as many companies, because all the data is sitting in one powerful piece of machine in your hand. Simple as that.
If there's one more.
We've actually done screening from many platforms. Unfortunately, there's one missing link that Mr. Dozier is coming up with. And what's the missing link? We have a lot of packages, millions, sitting somewhere. The vendors are coming with transactions. So to migrate from that level to that transactional part. So the transaction is when transactions flow. But before the transaction flow, there are things that we need to compare with. There are information there that we need to access. That's one side. Two, the regulators, NIPS. We have a lot of customers, some with multiple BVNs, some with different biometric details of. So there are a lot of information that we need to harness. Now, how do we harness this with a simple solution? Understanding my problem. To harness it and to make it work. Because it's not when regulators come and say, oh, yes, you didn't do this, or this package is somebody's BVN, or this one is on New Gen. We have different platforms we are working with. NIPS is hosting different, conflicting, some information. So we want something simple I can address the needs. Thank you.
Would there be multiple BVN on an account? Yes, for the directors, but for the account opening, it's got to be one director's BVN. It wouldn't be that account would host multiple. It would be one that is accepted for the account opening. Even though all the directors will have their respective BVNs, but only one principal party's BVN will be used for that account. On the legacy systems that is hosting multiple information, where you have moved core banking many times, you should then have a middleware that all those legacy systems speaks to, and where your AI would then begin to fetch. Your AI must fetch for only one source, not from the multiple legacy systems. Your multiple legacy systems should be plugged to a middleware that your AI should then begin to feed from for your current core banking solution. But I think Dumebi will be able to, I just spoke it our language. Dumebi would have the AI language.
My answer to this is that no matter what system that you put, the problem we have in Nigeria is that you don't own your own data. I don't own my own data. So I don't know not because I'm a banker, so I go to one credit bureau, I see some information that doesn't tie, right? I can't access my information. So I think for me, I'm a big advocate of open banking, because what open banking does is puts the power back into the owner of the data's hand. If I know what my information is in all the different banks, right, then I have more authority and control, and I know who's actually trying to defraud or not defraud me. And there's so much more that can be done. Then any system that you put will be more efficient. The problem is that no matter what system that you put, it is inefficient if the framework in which the data permissions and who owns the data is not actually set in the right place. And I think for me, decision making is based on the information that you have. You will make a better decision on who Uzoma is if Uzoma gives you permission to pull my data from financial and non-financial places. So you have a holistic 360 degree of myself. And that then any system you put, it's a good system, it will come out with better answer. So I think first of all, we have to look at that framework and the philosophy of how that data is going to work in this ecosystem. That's my own view.
Yeah, no, I'm complete agreement. So I think the first thing I would criticize, and I think I hope all of you can appreciate this as well, is that there's no silver bullet. Yeah. You mentioned that one simple solution. does not exist. There is no one simple solution for this problem. So the first thing you need to do is, if I may say so, is to appreciate that it's a challenge, even for a machine. Yeah. And now, funny enough, as you mentioned, I was replaying in my mind. So Dan we used to work together, and he had a similar problem that you had, where you are trying to move from the manual side, where you have incorrect and incomplete and poor data, and then you're trying to migrate into a clean system. It is difficult, to be honest. Now, what needs to be done is discussing a clear strategy around it. And there are a few ways it can be done, depending on how complex. But long story short, you need to decide how you want to move from this system to the other. And some people, what they do is they just start afresh. Every customer treated like a new customer. And you leave all the legacy systems behind and you archive that. So regulators come in, you still have that information. But Mr. X is coming to my app, coming to my website, is like brand new. Customers won't like it. I've been banking with you before. Why? No, you're reclaiming your account, but I need to verify all this information from scratch. Option one. Option two, of course, is you have to contact each customer one by one and do it manually. But of course, that's not so ideal because you're going out there and it takes a lot of resources, a lot of time to clean that data. But so my short answer to that is there's a strategy that you need to apply, but it will take time, and but it's worth it. You can see that the longer it delays, the more that piles up, the more difficult it becomes. It's going to keep going. So the quicker you commit to the effort to resolve it, the better. Hope that answers your question.
Can we have a round of applause for the distinguished panelists, please?
As I said before, Izifin and FITC is here to help. We have a lot of those resources. We have a lot of those solutions, and we can help you accelerate that opportunity. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. Hope you don't go home yet. We're gonna have a drinks and refreshments in the terrace outside, so you be guided out. Please take the opportunity to network, to talk to us, to talk to your fellow colleagues and cohorts, learn a bit more about each other, and of course, hopefully talk about how you might leverage support for your AML ambitions going forward. But thanks very much for your time. Thanks for coming, and hopefully we'll see you outside for a chat. Cheers.